Hey everybody, it's Ken. So again, thank you guys so much for sending in your questions. I do look at all these. I think they're phenomenal. We have some super educated and people watching this stuff, and keep those things coming in on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the social medias and emails. Please keep sending those questions in. I love these. I think that a lot of times you'd be very surprised. We'll get multiple questions that people ask the same things from all over the world. And so it's really fun for me to see kind of what everybody's thinking and what they want to hear. So today I'm going to do a couple more questions, as we always do. And I really like this one, which was, how do you structure a big deal in terms of profits and ownership with investors? And so, as you guys know, I've done some videos on this specific thing, and we have over 200 different entities that we have at our company here at MC Companies. And, from office buildings to self-storage to billboards, to ground up construction on land, to value adds, to condo deals. And, I'm sure there's many, many, many more. In addition to that, we have a bunch of businesses. And so they all have different ownership percentages. They all have different investment needs. They all have different waterfalls, which are the structure. And so this is a phenomenal question. And, I hate to do this, but the truth is that, people want to know very concrete answers. But I'll tell you, and I get this question from my accountant all the time, is it just depends. So now I am going to give you some specific things, but it really does depend. And let me tell you, kind of, there's the dog and then there's the tail. You know what I mean? So, is the tail wagging the dog or is the dog wagging the tail? Generally, the equity is the dog. Okay, so if you have your own equity, you are in a much better situation on structuring to benefit yourself. If you have nothing, then you're going to actually have to give up the majority of the equity. So if you're going to go to New York, and let's say you have a deal and you're going to go to New York and you're going to try to raise some money like I did back when I first started from the Lehman Brothers. Now they're of course out of business, and we all know what happened there with the Big Short and all that. They're gone. But they were an incredible investment bank during the day. So I was in their boardroom, and four Harvard MBA guys walk in. They basically just beat the heck out of me. You know what I mean? They just negotiated the heck out of me. But I ended up with a 90-10 deal, which meant that I kept 10% and they put up 100% of the money, and I gave them 90%. And then there are what we call waterfalls, that were benchmarks based on internal rates of return, or IRRs, or return of capital. So I think the number was about a $9 or $10 million that I got from them. And so they're looking for a return on that money. So they're looking for, the obviously the equity appreciation and the cash flow and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's a straight 90-10 deal. You're going to find that as your IRR gets better, so maybe it starts around 14 or 15, gets up to 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Once you get to say over 20% IRR, your actually split could change to 50-50. Okay, so your ownership structure might start at 10%, but you have upside, just like an NFL quarterback. Like they get a base pay, and then as they perform and make the playoffs, they get X. If they make the Super Bowl, they get Y. If they, have certain hurdles that they have to do. I have a bunch of friends that have cut these deals and are quarterbacks in the NFL, and they're all very, very different. They're performance-based. It's the exact same thing where when you're getting money from Wall Street. And okay, so that's one scenario. So in that particular case, your internal rate of return gets better, then your percentage gets better, because what they're looking at is their core number. So Lehman Brothers was looking at their $9 million. When am I going to get it back? And then after that's what's called a waterfall. So the way waterfalls work, if you think about it, is the first thing that gets paid is the equity. Okay, so if somebody gives me $9 million, they want their $9 million back. Okay, the second thing that gets paid is what's called the preferred return. Okay, let's say, just for argument purposes, that preferred return is 10%, which is high, but they're going to want the $9 million plus $900,000 a year. Okay, so if you have the money for 3 years, that's 2.7 million. So the first 9 million goes, that's the first step in the waterfall. The second step in the waterfall is 900,000 a year times 3, that's 2.7 million. That's the second thing that gets paid. So now Lehman Brothers has been paid $11,700,000. We've satisfied their equity, we've satisfied their preferred return. After that, then there's another waterfall, and that's where you start to participate. And this is a very common deal. The equity gets paid first, the preferred piece gets paid second, and then that's when you start participating. I'm a big fan of this model because it puts your money where your mouth is. So you can go raise all your money you want, but if the property doesn't perform, you don't get paid. So the incentive is on the promoter or the developer to go, make sure that property performs. And so that's generally how waterfalls and structures are done. Now, let's go all the way down to friends and family money. Friends and family money would be, like crowdfunding, for example, which is a lot of small amounts, which we don't do, or it could be accredited investors, which is kind of where we spend our time. So we raise money through accredited investors. That deal could be significantly different. So I might do a 75-25 deal or a 50-50 deal, perhaps. And so a lot of it depends on the equity. So when the equity is less sophisticated, like, friends and family or doctors, lawyers, whatever, and that is, believe it or not, unsophisticated investors generally, even though they're accredited. And I know a lot of people are going to be upset for me saying that, but the truth is, doctors are doctors. They're very good at what they do, and they don't generally understand real estate. That's generally. Sometimes they do. But generally, they're just turning money over to people. And so it's not like negotiating with the Lehman Brothers. And so you're going to get a little bit better splits, obviously, if you have the less sophisticated the money is. And then there's everything in between. So the structures are super important. I think the one thing that I just wanted to point out here is as the deals perform, that's when you actually get paid. So you can raise all the money you want. Like a ground up construction, raising money, that you're not going to have any kind of equity or any kind of cash flow for years. Okay, so that money is sitting there and it's burning this preferred return every single month, while the property isn't performing. So if you sell the whole thing and you cash out in a mega way, then you're probably going to be into the money. So I think that the best way to raise capital is through a friends and family model, through on a much more organic, smaller level, and do something that's a win-win. And in my opinion, the first person that should be paid back is always the investor, and then there should be a return paid on their money, and then after that you should participate. And it should probably never be more than 50% if you're not using your own money. And if you are using your own money, then you have more leverage to be able to say, listen, my money's sitting alongside of your money, so therefore the split should be a little bit different. But phenomenal question, and keep them coming. The second question I have here is pulling the initial money that you put down in a refinance a safety net? So in other words, so let's say somebody puts $1 million down or $5 million down, and then it says if they pull that out in a form of a refinance, is that a safety net? And then they go further to say, because if you default after that, you only lose the money given to the bank and not your initial cash investment. The reason I picked this question, because there's a lot to it, believe it or not, even though it's a very simple question. So first, let me assure you that when we're talking about debt, not the equity, if you have a non-recourse loan, that means that if you default on the property, then yes, then the bank takes back the equity plus the loan and the property. So they get everything. Okay. And so, but if you have a recourse loan, like on a new construction, it's very hard to get a non-recourse loan on new construction. Then they're going to come after you personally for the loan and the equity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll make it really simple. Let's say you're doing a $10 million deal. You borrow $7 million from a bank and you raise another $3 million in equity. And that deal goes to $8 million. Well, if the loan's recourse, the bank's going to come after you for that $7 million. If the loan is non-recourse, then they're going to take the property. They have a non-recourse loan of 7 and they have $1 million of equity. So that's how that works. So now let's answer the question directly. If you pull your initial money out in a refinance, is that a safety net? And the answer is yes. So what you've done here, if you think about it, is you now are in this deal for zero. It's what we call an infinite return. So if you put up $1 million and a couple years later you pull that back and a cash out refinance, it's two things. One, you are now infinite on your return. Two, it's tax free. So the $1 million that you pull out in a refinance, it's not taxable because it's a loan. You actually owe it. But the one thing that was missed in this question, and this is the reason I picked it, is keep in mind, when you refinance, the bank's looking at the whole picture. They're not looking at your equity. They're looking at the entire picture. So they're never going to leverage themselves up on a refinance. In other words, the bank's never going to give you 80, 90, 100% debt, just so you can get your money back. Because now they're looking at what's called a debt coverage ratio. They're looking at the actual equity that's left after the refinance. They're looking at the net operating income, the way it's trending. So they're looking at a whole bunch of things. And so when we're taking a look at whether or not we're going to refinance or not, we're looking at the whole picture. Because the last thing we actually want is to be so heavily levered to where it barely kicks out any cash flow. So we want a win-win. We want to be able to pull our money out completely and be infinite and have a tax-free cash out refi. We want that. But we also want cash flow after that. And so that means that there's equity in the deal and that there's cash flow. And so the bank is never going to eat through that, because generally cash out refis add more debt in the event that in some particular cases, your interest rates can go down. Now, this has definitely happened to Ross and I. We bought stuff in the 5-6% rate, and our payment, let's say our payment was $250,000 a month on something, and then we got more debt, but the rates went down to say 4.5%, and so our payment might still be $250,000 a month because the rate went down, but we were able to pull more cash out. So our loan balance went up, but our rate stayed the same. So generally, I think you should just get your mindset around, especially now when the rates are so low. You should be using fixed rate debt as much as you can, because in my opinion, these times are not going to last. And if you can do cash out refis today and lock numbers at 3-4%. We just had a mortgage company give us a price of 3.2% on a fixed rate 40-year note on a property that we already own. And so we're looking at that right now. So if we could lock in, imagine I get 3.2% for 40 years. So that's beyond belief to me. That means that I'm actually beating inflation with somebody else's money. So the interest rates are really, really important. But sometimes they can be more. So let's go out 10 years. What if rates are 5 and 6% and you have something at 4? Now you're never going to be able to refinance or do a cash out refinance unless you've grown the value of the property significantly. So it's a really, really good question. The goal is always to do a cash out refinance and then have the property support itself with lots of cushion, because at that point, any cash flow to the partnership is infinite. and it's tax-free because you're also shoring it up with depreciation and other things that we talk about in a lot of the other videos. So again, thank you guys. Great questions. Keep them coming. I love doing these. It helps me. It helps the rest of the people that are subscribers. Thank you.